And here we go. Good evening, good morning, Dr. Anthony.
Hey, good morning. How are you?
I'm fine. How are things in Australia?
Things are good. Thank you. Yeah, it's still pretty warm here. All the summer's sort of fading, unfortunately, but yeah, things are good.
Okay. Let me read your bio. I was taking here. Dr. Anthony Chaffee is an American medical doctor and neurosurgical resident who, over a span of more than 25 years, has researched the optimal nutrition for human performance and health. It is his assertion that most of the so-called chronic disease we treat as doctors are caused by food we eat or don't eat and can be reversed with dietary changes to a species-specific diet. That's a great bio. So, Dr. Anthony, can you introduce yourself a little for our followers so they can know you a little better?
Yeah, my name is Anthony Chaffee. I'm an American medical doctor. I currently practice in Australia, and my my online presence is mostly to do with nutrition and how this affects health and chronic disease. I've noticed that the different nutritional guidelines that we've set out have been influenced by different industries and different special interests over the decades, and this has not reflected the actual science and evidence of what constitutes good health. As a result of that, the chronic diseases, the NCDs, the non-communicable chronic diseases, have flourished when they should have been suppressed. We're the most advanced that humanity has ever been that we know of, and yet we are getting sicker and sicker and sicker as we go. These diseases are getting worse; they're not getting better. Um, we treat about 90% of about 90% of the issues that doctors treat these days in the Western world are these non-communicable chronic diseases, the diabetes, the cancers, the heart disease, the autoimmune diseases, these sorts of things, mental health issues. These are things that are not supposed to be able to transfer between people. It's not a pathogen. It's not an outbreak of some sort of illness or disease or infection, and yet it's getting worse and worse and worse and spreading. So that's obviously an environmental impact, and we see this
Yeah.
in animals as well. We see this in our domestic pet population. Now we have entire industries selling fake food to our pets, and we're being told that this is scientifically proven to be the perfect thing for our pet. Well, actually, the science has shown that you feed them what they eat naturally. That's what they're biologically designed for, and that's what's going to be healthiest for them. And when you switch those animals back to eating their natural diet, then they get healthy again. We get healthy again. This is why they have signs at the zoo that say don't feed the animals, because it makes them very sick to eat things that they aren't designed to eat. We're animals too. Our dogs and cats are animals too. All these same rules apply. And those zoo animals, I've spoken to zookeepers and I've asked them this, and I said, well, what happens when you feed them these things? They said, well, when you feed them human food, they get human diseases, these non-communicable chronic diseases. What does that mean? That means the food is causing the disease. So we're told that these foods are not only safe, but some of them are actually good for us.
Yeah.
Some are saying, like potato chips and things like that. Well, you don't want to eat too much of them. They can give you extra calories, and that can make you put on weight. No, the things are harmful. They have harmful chemicals in there that disrupt your physiology and your biochemistry, and they cause disease. So that's my main issue, telling people that, look, we need to go back to eating real food. We need to go back to eating things that didn't get created in a lab, that humans are designed to eat. And when you get people eating what we're designed to eat, then a lot of these diseases go away. And so I found that is one of the most powerful tools in medicine as a doctor, is getting people to eat proper food, proper nutrition, and understanding what that is, because we've completely vilified our natural diet, the diet that people have eaten since the dawn of humanity, which is fatty meat. We've been told that this is actually the cause of these non-communicable chronic diseases and heart disease and cancer and diabetes and all these sorts of things, when they've never caused any of these diseases before this. And yet now these diseases are just getting out of control. We're eating less and less fat, less and less red meat. I mean, there isn't even an association between animal fat and red meat, or meat in general, with these non-communicable chronic diseases. We were eating all of these things before the 20th century. The 20th century is when these really took off.
Yeah.
And that's when we added in these processed foods, these industrial seed oils that were machine lubricants. And then someone said, hey, we can sell this to idiots and they'll eat it.
Yeah.
And then Procter and Gamble bought Crisco from the Germans, who used this as like a military vehicle lubricant. It was like for tank machinery lubricant and other machines. Procter and Gamble bought it from the Germans, and then they paid the American Heart Association $20 million to lie and say that it was better for your heart than animal fats like lard and butter. That's not supposition. That's not an accusation. That's a matter of historical record that has been reported and documented. The no serious doctor, no serious scientist independently came up with the idea that cholesterol caused heart disease. That was an invention of the sugar companies, because there were serious scientists who independently came up with the idea that refined sugar and these processed foods were associated strongly with the rise in heart disease in America. First death from heart attack recorded in the literature in America, confirmed on autopsy, was in 1912. There wasn't a single reported case of someone dying from a heart attack in America before that. There was exactly 8 that I could find throughout all of Europe, throughout all of the 18th century, and exactly 1 that I could find in the 1700s. Maybe there are more, but they're obscure. And then from 1912 to 1930, it grew to be the #1 killer in America. That was when we were eating the least amount of meat in 200 years in American history. So it is not even associated. Eating meat is not even associated with heart disease. And yet we're blaming it for these sorts of things. And that's because the sugar companies dumped billions of dollars into this. They invented this fiction that cholesterol and saturated fat cause heart disease. And then they found unscrupulous and dishonest doctors and researchers like Ansel Keys and several from Harvard and elsewhere to lie and falsify data and publish fraudulent studies to make it appear as if cholesterol caused heart disease when it was more likely sugar, and to exonerate sugar and say that it was safe, and in fact say that, well, you have to get your calories from somewhere, so might as well just stop eating fat and replace it with sugar. Sugar is just this safe, empty calorie. It was absolute poison. And they knew it was poison, and they just wanted to sell their poison. I mean, these are drug dealers. These are legal drug cartels.
Yeah.
And they have the exact same tactics as drug cartels. They hook their victims early, and then they have a junkie for life. That's what they do. And so, that's not supposition. That's not a guess. That's not a baseless accusation. That's reported in the Journal of the American Medical Association in 2016, where they published the actual internal memos from the sugar companies themselves, where they said they did this.
Yeah.
One of those professors from Harvard, there were 3 in particular named in those documents. One of them was named head of the USDA, and he was the one who authored and published the USDA declaration saying that cholesterol caused heart disease, saturated fat increased cholesterol, stop eating both. And that's what changed the world. It's an appeal to authority. Teacher said so, therefore
Yeah,
everything
yeah.
needs to stop.
And
So
that's what we heard we hear in university in college. In
yeah.
my nutrition college was exactly the same.
Mhm.
Cholesterol cause heart disease, and that's it. Don't even argue with the teacher. You don't have the facts. The
Mhm.
facts are all with the authorities, and that's it.
Mhm.
You can't
Yeah.
argue. And but everything you said, you didn't learn that in the medical school.
No, definitely not. No. So this is all independent of that. But the thing is, what I did learn in medical school was how to keep an open mind, and
Mm.
what I did learn in school was that things we were going to be taught in medical school wasn't the final word. We had a professor that said to us in the first few months of medical school that by the time we graduated medical school, everything we learned in medical school will become obsolete. And so
Yeah.
we have to stay current. We have to stay on top of these things because information is just coming out so quick, and we just have to stay on top of this. There was a very famous address to the graduating class of Harvard Medical School in the late 1930s, I believe, where the person giving the speech said, um, half of what you have all learned here at Harvard is going to turn out to be wrong, but no one's going to tell you which half. You have to figure that out. You have to keep learning and studying and researching and experimenting so that you can see what's right and what's wrong so that you can be better doctors for your patients. And so that's what I've tried to do. I came across information in medical school from the work of Dr. Robert Lustig from UCSF, UC San
See?
Francisco Medical School,
Yeah.
which is a top 10 medical school and research institution in America. And he showed that he in the biochemistry department at UCSF showed that fructose is metabolized in the same way as alcohol, breaks down to the same byproducts, causes the same damage to our liver and our body, causing fatty liver disease, cirrhosis, diabetes, heart disease, even implicated in cancer and Alzheimer's and other sorts of chronic, non-communicable chronic diseases. So that was very eye-opening. They showed, the robust biochemical data showing that this is how this reacts in your body. He's done countless studies since then in humans showing reversibility of metabolic syndrome and fatty liver disease when you remove fructose. And so this is and it satisfied the Bradford Hill criteria for causation. And then I came across information in 2015, 2016, showing that when people are actually, when you're looking for outcomes, so we said that cholesterol is bad, cholesterol causes heart disease, people accepted that. And then we started saying, okay, well, these interventions lower cholesterol, therefore they should lower heart disease. But then someone actually said, okay, but does it lower heart disease? Does it lower cardiovascular disease? And so we had large studies with elderly populations, especially people over the age of 65, that over 60,000 patients. And they found that people that were on statins with lower LDL cholesterol actually had more heart attacks and strokes than people who had higher LDL and no statins. And so the conclusion was, hey, look, we may have looked at this wrong. There's something else going on here, and this is not necessary. We may need to rethink what we think we know about cholesterol and heart disease and these cholesterol lowering medications. And then the evidence started pouring out from there. The Journal of American Medical Association, JAMA, published in 2016 those internal memos from the sugar company showing that this was just a lie in the first place,
Yeah.
and that this has been perpetuated for decades. Again, the American Heart Association is implicit in a lot of these things as well. They misrepresented data and studies from the Framingham study, which I was taught in medical school as saying higher higher total cholesterol was associated with higher rates of cardiovascular mortality, cardiovascular disease mortality rates. That's what the AHA said, the American Heart Association, the same people that were paid $20 million to lie about Crisco and other vegetable oils and trans fats. Um, well, they lied about that too, because the Framingham study actually showed that as you lowered total cholesterol, cardiovascular disease mortality went up. So it was
Yeah.
exactly the opposite. And they lied and they misrepresented it. And because they had the moral authority saying we're the American Heart Association, oh, we really care about your heart. No, they're a bunch of sellouts and crooks, and they were trying to make money, and they were trying to use their brand as the authorities on heart disease and trying to help people get healthy and get cardiovascular health. That they were able to sell that to the highest bidder, and unfortunately, it's the processed food companies and sugar companies that had the money, and so they were paying them off, and that's why we think the way we do. So we have to undo that. So all this information is coming out, and I don't know why these people aren't in jail. Probably because they're not in charge anymore. But the tobacco companies were lying for decades, and they got massive fines. They got massively in trouble. No one's doing anything about the sugar companies because I don't know why.
And most
But
of the tobacco industries, the companies that sell tobacco, bought the
yep,
sugar companies, so they are
yep,
one. Yeah,
same
and they
people.
use the same techniques.
That's it. Same drug dealers selling different
Yeah,
drugs. That's
yeah,
it. And that always confused me about the tobacco companies because they were caught lying for decades, saying that, oh, we no, well, what about these studies showing that tobacco causes harm and is addictive and can cause emphysema and cancer and all these other health issues. And they say, oh, but our studies say that they don't do that and everything's good. Oh, I guess we just need more studies. And the default there is, well, let's do more studies and my product gets to stay on the market in the meantime, right? So they
yeah,
just delayed this for decades, and eventually got caught out. Their internal memos, just like the sugar company's internal memos, got leaked out, and they found that they were lying and that they were falsifying these reports and these studies and making it look as if tobacco was safe and harmless and not addictive, and they knew that it wasn't. Um, and now we know that about the sugar companies. Well, the tobacco companies got fined, I think it was about $400 billion, even though they made trillions over that time.
yeah,
So there was really, I mean, yeah, obviously they didn't they didn't want to pay it, but they made far more than that in the time that they were lying. So it was still worth it to them to lie. Um, they knew that this stuff was causing harm and causing death. That's a criminal act.
yeah,
So I mean, this is like people who went out and poisoned wells, knowing that they were going to hurt people and kill people. And oh, no, 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 we have no, oh, no, no, that wasn't that, we didn't do anything. Oh, well, we're going to have to take some money away from you. No, you go to jail. You get executed. Like that's
yeah,
what you do
yeah,
when you cause a mass genocide on people.
yeah,
They've killed millions of people, tens of millions of people,
yeah,
affected hundreds of millions of people with emphysema, lung cancer, and cost people trillions of dollars in the requisite medical expenditures to treat these horrible diseases that smoking brought on. So they should be criminally culpable, not just financially culpable.
yeah.
And they didn't pay nearly what they should have if they actually were going to cover the medical expenses for these people. So, that's they got away scot free basically, and that sort of told them, hey, we can just keep doing this, and that's what they're doing with this with the processed food and all this garbage.
Yeah. They just
Um,
change the product.
that's it, and and tobacco is still out there too,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah,
So, they're just doing the same thing, and they just think that, well, we can just keep doing this because the food manufacturers produce the vast majority of nutritional studies and research on cholesterol and all these other sorts of things, saying that aspartame is safe, saying that sugar is safe, saying that all these other sorts of things. You get these influencers online say, oh, but look at this study, look at this study. Couldn't give two shits about any of those things. First of all, most of them are like consensus statements. Most of them are epidemiology and garbage. They're not interventional trials in humans showing long-term established
yeah,
causal links. Um, Coca-Cola alone spends 11 times the amount of money on nutritional research than the National Institutes of Health, the NIH.
11
So
times.
11 times every year. And that's just Coca-Cola. That's not Nestle, Pepsi, Kellogg's, all these other sorts of General Mills, all these massive sorts of things. Pepsi has a $2 billion annual marketing budget, right? So, and how much do they put into research? because that research, that fraudulent research where they publish these studies, that's marketing too. That's all that is. It's just pushing a product. They're saying, oh, look, sugar's safe, sugar's good. Oh, it doesn't make drinking sugar makes you lose weight even.
Yeah.
Look at all these sorts of things. Like, I mean, there's these things that are just so ridiculous, but they get put out there,
Yeah.
and then they pay other people off. I mean, you think that they stopped paying people off with just these Harvard professors and Ansel Keys and these others? Of course that's not the case. Of course, I mean, that's just a normal tactic that they have. There were a lot of online influencers, and that's the thing. People with an online platform, as a health promoter and a health influencer, these are prime targets to get captured by these industries. And a lot of them, that's their job. Their job is to make online content and sell crap through their affiliate codes and other sorts of things. You know that's their main job. And like I have affiliate codes and things like that, but I try to keep it as like things that like I actually would use myself or do use myself, or like at least I think is going to benefit people, because this isn't my job. I have a job. This actually takes a lot of time away from my job and
Yeah.
makes it so I don't
I
get
think.
sleep and makes it difficult for me to do the things that I love doing, treating patients and doing surgery,
Yeah.
because it's important. It's important to get this information out there.
Yeah.
There were a lot of so-called health influencers that recently got caught up with the different, I think, what was it, the sugar, anyway,
Yeah. I saw that
operation.
was in Canada or United States. I don't remember. It
It was
was
all
a
over. So there are people in the
they
U.S.,
were they
Canada, and
were
Europe.
receiving money to defend sugar and things like that.
So sugar and specifically aspartame. So the
Yeah.
WHO came out and listed aspartame as a potential carcinogen, and that obviously is going to hurt sales of Diet Coke and diet sodas. And
Mm-hmm.
so they, through a different, partner corporation or subsidiary, started paying off people online to start coming out. Oh, this is ridiculous. This is blah 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 blah, and talk about all these studies that were, paid for by these industries to say that aspartame was really good for you, or at least not bad for you. And so they did that. And the thing is too is that a lot of them got caught out because they didn't say that they were being paid to say these things. So these were paid ads, and they didn't tell anybody. They didn't tell anybody that they were paid.
Yeah.
And so a lot of people got in trouble for that. But I'm sure a lot of other people didn't even get caught for it. They just got away
Yeah.
with it.
Yeah.
So it's really frustrating to see the just the dereliction of human compassion for other people. They just,
We are literally swim against the tide.
oh yeah, yeah.
That's the real story. And how did you came with the carnivore diet? How was your first contact with this kind of feeding? How was your results with this kind of?
Mhm. Yeah, so, well, I mean, I learned, and possibly you learned, and most people learned as children in school, that humans were apex predators, are
Yeah.
apex predators. And we have been for millions of years. We were hunters, and we hunted things. And that's what actually why we became human, is because our ancestors were hunters and started eating more meat and more meat. And we started evolving and developing into what we are today. And we didn't have the big teeth and claws, so we had to figure out other ways of taking down mammoths, mastodon, the largest land animals alive at the time. And how are we going to take these things down with these little things, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
We figured out tools, we figured out tactics, we mastered the control of fire. We set fires in these points and scared herds of mammoth or bison over cliffs, and where they fell to their death. And then we used stone tools to cut them up and use them for meat and dry the meat and prepare that for the rest of the year. So our brains developed, and our brains had this massive increase in growth over the past 2 million years because we became apex predators. Apex predators, by definition, are carnivores.
Yeah.
It's a lot easier to be a carnivore, to eat another animal, because an animal is made out of animal tissue. And what's the point of eating is to build and develop our own animal tissue and to survive. It's very difficult to turn plant tissue into animal tissue. It's an entirely different form of life. And a lot of those nutrients are not bioavailable. We don't have the enzymes to break these things down. No animal has the ability to break down cellulose fiber. And yet we're told, because we can't break it down, because we can't get nutrition from it, that's why you should eat it somehow. And then we're told, not only that, but it's an essential nutrient. Well, hold on a second.
That's completely crazy.
Well, you just said that it's not even a nutrient. You can't get any nutrition from it. How can it be an essential nutrient? It's not even a nutrient, right? So that's ridiculous. So no animal that eats fibrous food is not able to break these things down. But it's not the animal that breaks it down. It's the microbes in their gut that break it down. The microbes eat the fiber, and as a byproduct, they release saturated fat, and then the microbes die off, and they're absorbed as protein. So a cow or a gorilla or a zebra may eat fibrous plants, but what they absorb is saturated fat and protein. That's what animals need. We need saturated fat and protein. So you have carnivores that eat other animals, or even herbivores that opportunistically eat smaller animals, which happens all the time. You see like deer and elk and horses eating little ducklings and rabbits and things like that.
If they got the chance, they will eat some meat.
They will, exactly. And it was actually a story of these cows that unfortunately were abused and sort of neglected and left in this barn. They just weren't able to get out. They weren't able to get feed, and some of them started dying, and they started basically eating the dead bodies of their compatriots. And then they were rescued eventually and taken out to a rancher that was able to care for them. They didn't want to eat grass anymore. They had a taste for meat, and they wanted meat.
Yeah,
and the article that I read that was talking about this, they couldn't bring themselves to saying that they were eating meat and they were eating other cows, but they said that the only way that they could survive was eating animal protein. And so they survived eating animal protein. They didn't say what kind of animal protein is, but if they're dying, that's the animal protein that's available is there. And then they said that after they got rescued, they insisted on eating animal protein. So they had to keep being fed animal protein. They wouldn't eat grass and normal feed anymore. And so it's just like, okay, so these are just just these meat eating cows. I sort of think the classics, the Greek classics of Heracles. You had the Thracian horses where they were carnivorous, and they would hunt people come in, and they just kill them. They eat people and things like that. And Heracles had to take them down. But that reminded me of that. So they will opportunistically eat meat, right? Because that's what at the end of the day we need to eat. So that's going to be good for every animal, is other meat from other animals. It's actually very difficult to gain nutrition from plants, not only because it's not bioavailable, not only because not every animal can break down fiber, but also because they come loaded with toxins. And plants have around 1 million different defense chemicals that stop animals and insects from eating them. And that's what I learned in college. I learned that in botany and biology. Plants and animals are an evolutionary arms race. Plants becoming more and more toxic, so less and less animals can eat them, so they can survive and thrive. Then animals are becoming more adapted to specific poisons in specific plants, so they can eat that plant or that family of plant and safely and survive and thrive. And that's their dedicated food source. And that's why cows eat grass, but they eat specific grasses.
Yeah.
And zebras eat specific plants and grasses, and koalas eat one plant. Pandas eat one plant. They can eat those plants, but they don't eat other plants because it's not safe for them to eat other plants. So food is very species specific. It depends on what you are, especially any animal can eat meat, but eating plants is very species specific, and it's very, very dependent on your evolutionary background. So you can't just eat any random plant. You can eat, meat as long as it's not a poison sac or some venom or something like that on it. But so that's the thing. So if your species hasn't evolved to eat a specific plant, that plant is bad for you, and that is what is taught in biology. That is what is taught in botany. And I was taught that. And then you go home and you're told to eat vegetables. And
Yeah.
you just assume, oh, well, these are just the ones that we're supposed to eat. These are the ones that are good for us because that's what you're told. But there's no actual evidence of that. And the actual evidence shows that no, we haven't been eating these things very long. And then, native populations, the natives of North and South America, the natives of Australia, Sub-Saharan Africa, most of these people were predominantly hunting or eating meat when it was available, apart from certain isolated areas that had developed agriculture, like in Mesoamerica and things like that. But then when, the Western powers came over to these areas and started colonizing, they brought that idea of agriculture around, and anywhere you look where people started eating more Western food, they started getting Western diseases. Before that, when they were just eating their natural diet, they got, they didn't get sick in the way that Westerners did. So I call them diseases of the West. These were Western diseases that Westerners got. But then when these native people started eating the food of the West, they started getting diseases of the West. So again, that means the food is causing it. And so that's what I learned when I was a kid, that Native Americans in North America, when eating a Western diet, were 4 times as likely to get all the NCDs, the non-communicable diseases, as people of European descent. And I remember thinking, like, well, doesn't that mean the food is causing the disease? Because if they don't eat the food, they don't get the disease. When we eat the food and we get the disease, we just get it at a lower rate. And what's a non-Western diet? What the hell are they eating that we're not, and vice versa? Well, no one told me at the time, but it was a high-fat, meat-based diet if they could get it, and they would fill in with plants if they had to. But a lot of them didn't have to.
Yeah.
The Plains Indians had buffalo drops. There's over 100 million bison throughout America, and they would come through once a year on their migration route. They'd scare a whole bunch of them over a cliff. That would be food for the year. They didn't have to worry about it after that. And so I learned all of these things, but it never clicks in until I was taking a class on cancer biology at the University of Washington in Seattle. And so we were going over things from the idea of carcinogens. So we were learning that all these plant toxins were carcinogenic or could be carcinogenic. And so Brussels sprouts, we were told, had 136 individual carcinogens. Mushrooms had over 100. And spinach, kale, lettuce, celery, cabbage, cucumber, broccoli, tomatoes, all the fruits and vegetables that we would normally eat, they had dozens, if not over 100, known carcinogens in them. They were quite abundant. We had work from Professor Bruce Ames from UC Berkeley, that the different toxins and carcinogens that he found in these plants were actually far more abundant than the pesticides were spraying on them. So it was over 10,000 times more abundant by weight. The naturally occurring toxins were over 10,000 times more than them, and he didn't even know about all of them. Just the ones that he knew about at the time in 1990 were cataloged there, and they were 10,000 times more abundant. And that the naturally occurring toxins were more carcinogenic. In fact, the ones in mushrooms were found to be hundreds of times more carcinogenic than the pesticides he was comparing them to, in this case, alar. And so we were very taken aback by this. We were very shocked. And I remember everyone was just looking around going like, this has to be a joke. It's got to be joking. This can't be real. And I remember looking for someone who was like in on the jokes, or laughing or smirking. There wasn't anyone. And eventually we all sort of settled down. And I remember thinking in my head, I was like, but vegetables are still good for you though, right? And he just took a look at us and he just said, he gave us a funny look and he said, I don't eat salad. I don't eat vegetables. I don't let my kids eat vegetables. Plants are trying to kill you. I was like, right, screw plants. And so, that was it for me. I don't know if that influenced the other students in the same way, but for me at least, that was job done. I went to the I went to the grocery store after that, and I was just like in a daze, looking at all the food. I'm like, well, what the hell do I eat then? Like everything it has a plant or has plants in it, and there's bread and pasta and obviously vegetables and produce, but all the different packaged meals, they always were mixed in with vegetables and all these sorts of things, or bread and grains and all these sorts of things. And I was like, what the hell do I eat? And I just came around some eggs. And I was like, oh, okay, I guess eggs. Eggs don't come from plants. I'll get some eggs. And I went around the meat aisle and I was like, okay, meat. I'll get some meat. That doesn't come from plants. My whole purpose was not to eat toxic plants, right? So I was just like, I'm not going to touch these things. And I switched over, and so I defaulted into a carnivore diet, even though I wasn't thinking about it as a carnivore diet. I was just not going to eat plants. And so I was just eating other things that weren't plants. And I felt amazing. I've never felt better in my entire life. There's a period of 5 years that I was doing this before I sort of slipped off, because I wasn't doing it like I am now, where I'm consciously like, oh no, that's who we are as a species. We're actually carnivores as a species. That's just the kind of animal we are. And just like animals at the zoo, we have an appropriate diet, a biologically appropriate diet that we need to stick to and maintain, or we'll be very harmed by this. Yeah. And so, at the time, it was just like, I'm not eating plants. And so, it slipped off, because I said to myself, because people say now, oh, well, dose makes the poison. I had that same stupid remark in my head. And I said, well, maybe dose makes the poison. You have this chicken that's breaded, has some crumbs on it. I was in England and I was playing rugby, professional rugby. And I didn't know, well, I didn't have access to the same types of meat that I had in America. And so some of it is just a bit more convenient to get some like crumbed chicken. And so I said, okay, well, I'll get this. Well, it's a plant, has that on there, but dose makes the poison. Is it all that bad? And I convinced myself that, it's not going to be that big of a deal. It was a big deal. Yeah, dose makes the poison. Dose was really damn small. WHO says that there is no safe upper limit on cyanide. And you should just not consume cyanide.
Yeah.
And yet nowhere on the label of a packet of almonds or cassava or tapioca or flaxseed or apple seeds, or saying something with a whole apple, like juice that's just put a whole apple in there and the seeds have a high concentration of cyanide. Nowhere does it say, hey, you need to be careful, this contains cyanide. You shouldn't have more than this much because of the cyanide dose. It could be harmful to you and have long-term sublethal exposure. It can cause thyroid dysfunction, goiters, and neurological damage, right? That's well known. That's well established in humans, right? And no one says that. It doesn't say that on any of the packets, on any of the labels, right? Even though you search into WHO, they say, hey, you really need to really limit this as much as you can. And as little as 50 milligrams of cyanide can kill you depending on your weight, right? So depending on the size of the person, like 0.5 milligrams per kilogram can be a lethal dose of cyanide, right? And so flaxseed, like a serving of flaxseed, can have up to 6 milligrams of cyanide in it, right? So if you were just going crazy on the flaxseed because there's all these omega-3s, and they say, oh, omega-3s, you want to have omega-3s, so you're dumping in a bunch of flaxseed that also has, it has omega-3s, but first of all, it's the wrong kind of omega-3s. It's ALA, not DHA or EPA, which are the ones you need for your brain. They don't convert into DHA or EPA any more than maybe, a few percent. And you bring in, it has that ALA, but it also has cyanide, and it also has a lot of estrogen in it as well. So, people don't understand that it's not just about getting nutrients. It's not about getting the requisite nutrients. It's about avoiding harmful substances going in your body. And that's the main thing. So when I was doing this initially, I never felt better. There's this 5-year period that I just felt like a superhero. I couldn't get tired. I couldn't run out of energy. I couldn't get sore. I didn't get sore from working out. After that, I started these little breaded chicken things started coming into my diet a couple times a week. It wasn't even every day. And all of a sudden I was getting sore. My back hurt. My legs were hurt. And I had these pulled muscles. And I was like, what the hell is going on? I never feel like this. I thought I had an injury. I thought I was having injuries. And I was like, there's something going on that was like a chronic problem. And I didn't just realize that this is just normal soreness. And but I hadn't felt sore in 5 years,
Yeah.
right? And so not delayed onset muscle soreness anyway. You can get battered up and bruised and from rugby games. That's typical, but
Okay.
not the muscle soreness from exertion. I felt like an absolute superhero. I could train harder than anybody around me. I could push myself harder, and athletically, I was just, you know, just supercharged. And then all of a sudden, it was a struggle when I was 25, and I was thinking, well, why don't I feel as superhuman amazing as I normally do? Am I not working out as hard? Am I not pushing myself? Am I, I'm 25 now. Is that just over the hill? I'm just dying now. My body's just decaying. This is what people tell you. You get in your late 20s, and it's just all
Yeah.
downhill from there. 2 months earlier, I felt like a superhero. Now I didn't feel very good. And I could still perform, I could still play, but it was a struggle. It was a much bigger struggle. And I continued playing for another 5 years of just high level rugby as my main distraction, and then went to medical school when I was 29, and kept playing rugby throughout medical school and beyond, but never felt the same like I did in those 5 years of my early 20s. And I always kept thinking, like, how do I get back to that? How do I get back to feeling like that? Well, fast forward to when I'm 38 years old. I'm 44 now. When I was 38, I rediscovered this because I looked at information that was like, no, humans just actually are carnivores. That's just the kind of animal that we are. And that's what I was doing. I was living as a carnivore. And just like all these other animals, they need their appropriate diet. That's what I was doing. And now I'm not. I started looking at this as a doctor from that perspective. And I started realizing we're carnivores biologically, and yet we're not eating as such. And so we're getting all these diseases. And all these things just started slotting into place. All of these diseases that we said are idiopathic, meaning that we're idiots and we can't figure out what the hell is going on. That these fit very well into this model where we don't know, we just don't know. So here's a drug that you have to be on for the rest of your life to mitigate the symptoms of this disease, like disease modulating medications for like autoimmunity and rheumatoid arthritis, and these different biological agents that cost thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars a month, have horrific side effects, and just treat the symptoms, not the problem itself. And that's, again, profitable for these companies. Goldman Sachs had a slide from one of their presentations leaked that said, is it a good business model to cure diseases, right? Saying that, like, hey, we should just perpetuate disease and just treat the symptoms, and we can do that forever. And you have a 6-year-old that develops rheumatoid arthritis or Crohn's disease, got them. Now you have the rest of their life, they're going to be on our drugs. And instead of curing that 6-year-old and being actual doctors and actual good humans that are helping humanity, and saying, okay, there's a 6-year-old that has Crohn's disease. Okay, we're going to cure the Crohn's disease. Now they never have it again. That's what medicine is supposed to be. That's what it used to be. People used to try to cure diseases and stop people from being sick in the first place. Now it's completely corrupted by industries that make trillions of dollars if we're sick. We spent $15 trillion, nearly $15 trillion, just treating the top 5 non-communicable diseases worldwide in 2010. And that's estimated to double by 2030 of what we spend each year treating those 5 diseases, like cancer and heart disease and diabetes, etc. Right?
About 2 weeks ago, 2 weeks ago, we have the news that we reach 1 billion obese people in the world.
Mm-hmm.
So that's 12.5% of all humankind. Just obese. We're not talking about overweight. So if you sum that up, you have almost the entire population, world population, are sick. So the carnivore diet that made you feel like a superhero back in the time in that you have now, it's like a lifeboat that you can use to rescue from this disease. But do you eat only red meat? No exceptions?
Well, just meat, no exceptions.
Just meat.
Meat and eggs. Yeah. Okay. So I prefer red meat. I always feel best on red meat. people with autoimmunity really do need to stick to just red meat, because if you're raising your own animals, you're getting pasture raised, pigs and chickens and things like that. Um, wild caught fish. Those are much better because they're eating what they're designed to eat as well.
Yeah.
When again, it's very difficult for animals to eat plants that they are not designed to eat, and so they can't detoxify these things as well as they would other things. And so those can get in their body. Now they will detoxify a lot of these things, but they won't be as healthy. They won't be as nutritious. They won't have the nutrient density because they're not eating their most nutritious food. So their body's not going to be as nutrient dense as it could be, right? I mean, you take your blood test and you find that you have low B12 and low zinc and low iron and low this and low that. Well, obviously, if someone ate you, then they would be getting a lower amount of
Yeah.
zinc and magnesium and B12 and iron and all that. Same thing with the animals. The animals that we can factory farm, they're not going to be as nutritious as if they were eating their natural diet and had all the nutrients up at normal levels. And they will have a bit more of these toxins in them, or high linoleic acid, which is omega-6, that is can be quite harmful. And so very high levels of this in factory farmed pigs and chicken and things like that. So most people will do fine on those, but there are people that are more sensitive. And so especially people with autoimmune diseases, if they eat factory farmed pigs or chicken or farmed fish, which I don't think anyone should eat farmed fish, it's really they're not healthy. And then it's actually pretty horrific conditions that they live in. It's
Mm.
not nice for the animal. And we have a duty and a responsibility as custodians of these animals. If we're going to be using these things for our own nutrition and our own betterment, you damn well better treat those animals right. We do not have the right to abuse these animals and make their
Yeah.
lives
Yeah.
miserable, and then raise them for slaughter and have their lives be miserable. We have a social contract with
Yeah.
these animals.
I agree
We
with you.
keep them safe. Yeah, we keep them healthy. We keep them safe from harm. We fix them when they're sick and injured, and then we do as best as we can to kill them as quickly and as humanely as possible. And there's no nice way to kill anything, but
Of
at
course.
least now our modern tactics are as instant as it is possible to be, so that they don't feel pain and they don't suffer. And that's very important. And I think that farmed fish, we are not meeting that responsibility. And they're also just not healthy. They're being fed a bunch of corn and soy and nonsense like that. It's like, what fish eats that? Those things, they don't even exist in the
Yeah.
ocean. Fish eat other fish, right? They're not eating plants at all, and they're certainly not eating those plants. And so they're very unhealthy. They have like no omega-3s. Salmon get omega-3s from the fish that they eat, right? There is no omega-3, DHA or EPA in the feed pellets that they're getting naturally, unless they add it to it. So it's very unhealthy. So people with autoimmunity, they quite often will react quite negatively to that. They'll react horrifically to plants, but some of those plant toxins can get through into the meat itself. So they do better on that. I always feel my best on red meat. I always feel the best of the best on regeneratively raised, grass-fed, and finished beef. And objectively, they tend to have 4 to 5 times the number of micronutrients in them as well. Have a better complement of omega-3 to omega-6s, the more DHAs and EPAs, better for your brains, better for your nervous systems, better for your body. And so that's what I feel the best on, but that's not always accessible to people. That's not always possible for people to get. You don't have to throw away the great for the perfect. And and cows that eat grass most of their life, and then for the last couple of months they go into a feedlot to fatten up. That's still great. That's still fantastic nutrition. The ruminant animals like red meat. This is why red meat is usually better for people, is
Yeah.
because they have a much more complicated stomach system, and this ruminant stomach system. They're foregut digesters, and so they have the top part of their digestive tract is very complex, and they're much better able to detoxify and extract nutrients out of the plants that they're eating, even if it's plants that they're not designed to eat.
Yeah.
And so they're much better able to do that. And so you get much safer food from them, even though it's not necessarily as nutritious as others, as their normal food, it's still extremely good for you. So I think of it as sort of like gold and silver medal at the Olympics. The grain finished is still, got silver to the grass-fed gold, and silver medalists lost to gold, and that's sad and everything. But the silver medalists also beat everybody else on earth, right? So it's still a really good position to be in. And if people don't have access to grass-fed and finished beef, or they can't afford it, this shouldn't break the bank. This actually should end up being cheaper because you eat far less. It's far more nutrient dense. You don't need as much of it, and you're not eating all the junk and the processed food and the garbage that actually is much more expensive. If you look at like potato chips per pound,
Yeah.
they're generally more expensive than steak, right? Same with spinach. Spinach per pound is actually very expensive, and so per pound you can get much. I mean, brisket is cheap as hell. I think especially in Brazil, I'm sure you guys have great
Yeah. We
beef.
have a cut here that we call picanha.
Yeah,
That's
great.
absolutely delicious cut.
Mhm.
And we have this potato chips and Cheetos in the bag that is twice, triple the price of picanha. It's very,
Yeah,
very expensive.
yeah,
And
exactly.
when you eat picanha, you don't get hungry. And if
Mhm.
you eat a pound or 2 pounds of Cheetos, you're gonna still be hungry.
Mhm. Yeah, exactly. And
Yeah,
or spinach, right? I mean,
yeah,
spinach has next
yeah,
to no nutrients in it. It has some, but most of them are not bioavailable. It comes with a lot of toxins like
yeah,
oxalates that can be quite
yeah.
harmful, and it's
Here
expensive.
in Brazil, the vegetable that is most eaten is broccoli. Everybody
Mm.
loves broccoli, and
Hmm.
I think the sulforaphane that has in broccoli, it's a
Hmm.
high level toxin, and
Hmm.
they are eating at tons of broccoli.
Hmm. Yeah, well,
And
that's the thing.
yeah,
Well, yeah, well, they say, well, at certain levels, sulforaphane is good for X, Y, and Z. Oh, it's anti-cancer and this, that, and the other. And the question I always ask is, okay, do you have cancer?
yeah,
No. Well, then why are you taking chemo? That's a really bad idea. Chemotherapy kills people, right?
that's a
And so,
great question.
yeah. So, well, it's good for cancer. Okay, but you don't have cancer. So, there's a lot of things that are good for cancer too,
Yeah,
good for fighting cancer, but they're also good for killing you and causing a lot of harm. So, it's not what you want. And so sulforaphane is so toxic that the plant can't actually keep it in
yeah,
in that full form. It has to keep it in two different chemicals, subchemicals. That when the plant is crushed, like an animal is chewing it from maceration, it releases those chemicals, and then they bond and they combine into sulforaphane. It's like a kill switch. Like someone comes in and like in a movie or something like that, and they have a bomb, and basically if they let go of it, it will explode. And so if someone shoots them, then they'll drop it, and the bomb will explode and take out everybody. That's what the plant has.
yeah,
And sulforaphane is that. It's so toxic that the plant can't have it in its body. It'll kill it. And so it's just a kill switch. It's like, okay, I'm being eaten, well, I'm going to take you with me. You're going to kill me, I'm going to kill you too.
yeah. I'll
That's
kill
what
you
it is.
back. Yeah,
That's it. Plants do this with cyanide as well. We're talking
yeah,
about cyanide. Again, hydrogen cyanide is toxic to all forms of life. And so, again, it has two molecules that it stays in. And then when that almond is crushed, or those flax seeds are crushed, or the apple seed is crushed, and there's about 3,000 different plants that we know of that have these cyanogenic glycosides that do this, they release and they bind and combine into hydrogen cyanide, which is invariably fatal at certain doses, actually quite low doses.
yeah,
Um, so that's that kill switch, and so we see this in plants. We see this behavior where you bite in something and these things are released, and they form into something toxic. So you don't even need to. You really don't need to study this and do any tests. You just need to understand the principle that the plant is using this as a toxin. This is using this as a kill switch to release this toxin, have it combine and hurt the animal or insect that is trying to eat it. Now, we've gotten a lot of toxins, that we've now used as medications. So aspirin we derive from willow bark. Digitalis we have derived from foxglove. We derive many chemotherapy agents from yew bark. I mean, yew is horribly deadly. The whole plant is just toxic. But we extracted some of those toxins, and we can use that medicinally in certain places because it's more toxic to certain cancers than it is to the rest of your body, hopefully, and it can hopefully kill that cancer before it kills you. It's still killing you. It's still a toxin. It's just benefit, and that's what medicine is. Medicine is a toxin. It's a poison that gives more benefit in certain circumstances than harm. But if you're not in that circumstance, it's only causing harm. You're getting no benefit from it. And so you don't want to do that. And also they come with a lot of other things. Like you want the aspirin, you want the whatever. Well, it's coming with thousands of other chemicals that you don't want. That digitalis in the foxglove, well, maybe you want to prescribe someone digitalis. Well, you wouldn't want to give them foxglove because you don't know what the dose is. You can't measure, and this is measured in micrograms, the amount of digitalis, because the plant's not making it to help people with heart failure and make their heart more contractile. They're making it to stop your heart. Animal eats it and they drop dead of cardiac arrest. That's what that developed for. And we can use micro doses of this stuff in order to help people increase the contractility of their heart. But if you get that dose wrong and it's not enough, it's not going to do anything for them. Or if it's too much, it will kill them, right? So why would you guess at that dose by giving someone the plant version instead of an exact measured out dose, right? That's not great. And then also it comes with thousands of other chemicals as well. What the hell do those things do, right? So those can cause harm as well. And we're playing games here. So maybe sulforaphane in a certain dose is beneficial under certain circumstances, but you need to know the dose and you need to know the circumstance. And if it's not meeting both of those criteria, then you need to avoid it. That's the whole idea of using a medicine. Medicine you don't take every day, all day at any dose because it's good for you. No, it's toxic. And above a certain level, it's going to be very harmful. And so it's something that we need to understand. We can't just you can't be so cavalier and just say, I'm sure it's fine. Dose makes the poison, blah, blah, blah. Well, you need to know what the dose is then, don't you?
Yeah.
Right? Because our body is treating it like a toxin. When sulforaphane comes in our body, when cyanide comes in our body, when oxalates and all these other toxins come in our body, isothiocyanates and cruciferous vegetables, when those come into our body treats it as a toxic exposure and responds to it as a toxin by trying to detoxify, by trying to metabolize it and get rid of it and clear it from the body. That's what it's trying to do. And so we should really pay attention to that. Our biology, our own biology and biochemistry is telling us in no uncertain terms, this is a toxin. This is toxic to the body. We need to get rid of it. And people say, well, but in certain doses, it could be beneficial. Okay, what dose exactly and how do you know that? What did you do to prove that? People will say, well, people that eat more fruits and vegetables are healthier. Well, is that because of the fruits and vegetables, or is it that healthier people that do other healthy things like exercise, don't eat sugar, don't smoke, don't drink, do other sorts of healthy things called healthy user bias, that they're also eating vegetables because they're told that it's healthy to eat vegetables, so we're supposed to eat vegetables. So is that what's going on? You can look at, and again, all these things are epidemiology. A lot of them are paid for by the food and drug companies that profit from us being sick and want to push a plant-based diet because they know that people don't eat whole fruits and vegetables when they go on a plant-based diet. They eat processed crap like Cheetos.
Yeah.
And so you can look at some of these. There was a study actually out of Costa Rica, and someone, I swear to God, someone tried to actually do a video saying that, dose makes the poison, so this is stupid, all this other things that I've been saying and as proof of this, cited a study that with isothiocyanate, saying, "Oh, look at this, these health benefits from isothiocyanate." And it was a systematic review of epidemiology, and he said it was randomized controlled trials, which they weren't. And this is sort of his MO. It's a guy named Lane Norton. He just lies and says, that, oh, this is randomized controlled trials, say all these other sorts of things, because no one checks. None of his followers check and actually check his work and see, well, does this study actually say what you say it does? Is it even a randomized controlled trial? The answer is no. It almost never does. And so he just, he and a lot of others just assume that no one's going to check, and so they get away with it, right? And sorry.
Yeah,
And
no
so
problem.
one of these ones were on isothiocyanate, and so the systematic review, the author even said in the conclusions, hey, probably can't take much from this because the large majority of studies, including the systematic review, 68%, were actually very low quality evidence. They're actually low level data. So you probably shouldn't really take anything from this. It's probably pretty useless. So he didn't even read that far. He just looked at the title and just ran with
Yeah.
it. And
At most,
yeah,
he read the abstract and makes the video
that's it.
so he can gain some followers and likes and things like that.
That's
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And if he had gone through, he would have seen that the author of his own study said, this is a crap study. You should not take anything away from this. But also, if you read through the studies, I went through the studies. There wasn't a single one that was a randomized control trial. Oh, bring a randomized control trial. Not a single damn one, except one that looked at people icing cabbage and using iced cabbage leaves as ice packs for mastitis on their breasts instead of ice packs. And and they said, oh, some people prefer the cabbage because it shaped their breast better. And even though they both reduced inflammation to the same degree, it was just a subjective value judgment. They liked it better. And that had nothing to do with the ingestion of isothiocyanates. So there were no randomized controlled trials showing that the ingestion of these toxins showed an improvement.
Yeah.
So it's just epidemiology, and none of them showed benefits from isothiocyanates in healthy populations. They, in fact, a lot of them just showed that plants containing these plant toxins like isothiocyanates, when these people ate more of them, they were in a healthier cohort. But again, that's healthy user bias. There's one from Costa Rica showed that people that had a heart attack, so they gave them a survey. So we don't know how many people died of a heart attack. Could be that the high vegetable users, they all died from heart attacks, and that only a few survived, and that's why there were less of them. But the people that ate more, leafy green vegetables did have lower rates of heart attack, or survived. Less of them survived from heart attacks. But anyway, in this study, there were less of them, and so then they look at all the other sorts of things that are actually important, which are total caloric intake. They were eating 800 less calories on average than so they're comparing junk food diet to eating more fruits and vegetables. That's what they're comparing. They're not saying eating more plants instead of meat. They're saying eating more plants instead of eating more processed plants, because the processed foods, we're already 80% of our diet is plant-based. It's just processed plant-based.
Yeah.
Right. So they're eating more whole food plants, and they're better than the processed plants. But again, healthy user bias, because they ate 800 less calories per day on average. They smoked less. They ate less sugar, higher socioeconomic status, and less diabetes. And if you have less diabetes, you are absolutely going to have less heart disease. Yeah. And so then they actually did something interesting in that one, which is actually looked at people that genetically couldn't clear out these plant toxins like isothiocyanates properly. So they had a higher buildup of these plant toxins in their system. They said, okay, how did that affect it? Right? So the people that couldn't clear these things out and had higher levels of these toxins, but those toxins are good for you, right? Remember that. And those people that had the higher levels of toxins had more heart attacks in that high vegetable consumption group. So they're conflating many things. They're conflating healthy user bias with actual healthy outcomes from one of the interventions that they think is healthy, which is eating more fruits and vegetables. And then they're conflating eating more vegetables with the toxins in those vegetables being good for you. That's not what was tested. And so, at least that study showed that, what we want to know about is like, is this specific poison in these plants, are they better for health overall? And they found that, at least in this case, in this cohort, for these people, as far as heart attacks were concerned, no, they weren't better.
Yeah.
It was actually worse.
Yeah. Dr. Anthony, I want to be respectful of your time. I know you're going to start your day there. Mm-hmm. So I would like to ask you just one more question. What about the things that they say that we need that we don't have in meat, like vitamin C? Can we get vitamin C in a carnivore diet?
Well, first of all, yes, there is vitamin C in meat. There's actually more vitamin C in liver than there is in apples. But the fact of the matter is, you don't need nearly as much vitamin C if you're on a carnivore diet. So I haven't eaten a plant in 6 years. I haven't taken vitamin C. I don't take supplements. You don't need them when you're on a carnivore diet. If you've been on it long term. Now, if you're nutritionally deficient when you start a carnivore diet and you're very low on certain things, having a bit of organs, they're going to be very nutrient dense, having a bit of dedicated supplements. If you're critically low on certain things, sure, catch yourself up. But long term, you're going to be just fine on a carnivore diet, especially if you include a bit of organs every now and then as well. It doesn't even have to be all that much. Just include some a couple times a week. It's more than enough. And so vitamin C is plentiful, especially in liver. But the thing is that we worry about vitamin C because of scurvy. Scurvy is yes, if you are eating plant proteins, then you have to hydrolyze proline and lysine to make them bond tightly and make collagen. But when you're eating meat, you already get hydroproline and hydrolysine, and they'll bond tightly. If you don't have an adequate protein source and you need to make hydroproline, hydrolysine, and collagen from scratch, de novo, then you need vitamin C to catalyze a reaction that hydrolyzes proline and lysine. So if you don't have enough vitamin C and you don't have enough collagen in your diet or meat in your diet that has hydroproline, hydrolysine, then yes, you can get scurvy. But meat has hydroproline, hydrolysine available. You don't need it. And so the British sailors that got scurvy originally, it was the non-officers that were getting that because they weren't being fed meat. They were being fed gruel and rum basically. And they got scurvy. The officers did not get scurvy because they had meat in their diet. And in fact, the other major powers, the European powers, they never saw this. The ancient Greeks and Romans, they were sailing all over the place. There's no reports of getting scurvy. Leif Erikson going to North America from Scandinavia. There's no mention of scurvy. They didn't bring apples.
Yeah.
They just ate. They had salted meat. They had barrels of salted meat, and they ate fish, right? So that is that's something that was unique to the British at the time because they were feeding them incorrect things. And that's why they were called limeys, because the other European powers, the Spanish and French and Portuguese, they were like, oh, look at the British, these limeys, they think you need to eat limes to not get scurvy, and no one else was getting this, right? So that's why the British were called limeys and no one else was, right? So you don't need it when you're just eating meat, but also when you're eating carbohydrates, this actually changes how you absorb vitamin C. So there are things in plants that actually disrupt the way we absorb nutrients. There are things called anti-nutrients that stop our body, that bind and block out different nutrients like phytic acid and tannins and oxalates. They bind to different vitamins and minerals, and so we can't absorb them. They can actually get into our bloodstream and strip out calcium and other minerals from our blood. And then we need a massive abundance of these things to offset that. or protease inhibitors that block our enzymes from our pancreas from breaking down our food so that we can access it and absorb it. So depending on what you eat, you need a different constellation of food. And just carbohydrates can act as fiber is an anti-nutrient. It can block out as much as 30% absorption of your food. And people say this is a good thing. Oh, well, if you eat a high fiber diet, it stops you from absorbing all these carbohydrates. It stops you from absorbing all these different toxins and things like that. Like, oh, how about you don't eat the toxins in the first place, and then you don't have to worry about it. If you're only eating good food, if you're only eating nutritious food, then you don't want to block out the absorption. You don't want to stop your body from absorbing all these nutrients. And carbohydrates can be anti-nutrients as well. They can also affect your insulin, affect your hormones. Insulin affects over 100 different processes in your body besides glucose metabolism. And so if you raise your insulin just to lower your glucose, it's raising your insulin and its effects on all the other hormones and processes in your body as well. So all these things get out of balance.
Yeah.
So this is one of the major reasons. Well, one of the major reasons why we get sick is because our hormones in our body and our metabolism is out of balance. Our biochemistry is out of balance. Carbohydrates are similar enough to vitamin C. Vitamin C sort of looks like a fructose molecule with a little tail on it, and so it competes for binding sites in your body and with your GLUT4 receptor with carbohydrates and vitamin C. So they both get taken into the body by the GLUT4 receptor. And come here, buddy. Sorry. and so they'll both get taken in by the GLUT4 receptor. And so when you're eating, Jesus Christ, when you're eating carbohydrates, this blocks out the vitamin C. So you need an overwhelming amount of vitamin C just to get any in. And so that's why we say you have to have X amount of vitamin C, because everyone's eating carbohydrates. And when these numbers were being and levels were being measured, everyone was eating carbohydrates. So you had to so that's where that comes from. When you eat carbohydrates, you need vitamin C measured in milligrams. When you don't eat vitamin C, you need vitamin C measured in nanograms. That's 1/1,000,000th of a milligram. So it is largely dependent on what you eat, and that determines how much of these different nutrients you need. Great. If you're only eating meat, you get everything you need in the proportion that you need it. How do we know that? Do we have any studies that show it? No, we have our eyes. We've been eating meat for millions of years, and we have people alive right now exclusively eating meat, like the Inuit, that don't get scurvy, that don't get these problems. And in fact, the polar explorers that went up and started investigating the North Pole and all the different areas of northern Canada, they lived with the Inuit, and the ones that ate as the Inuit did and only ate meat, they were extremely healthy. In fact, a lot of them came back and wrote books about, hey, we should only be eating meat, like Professor Vilhjalmur Stefansson, was a Harvard ethnologist, and he lived with them for 12 years and said, hey, this is what we should be doing. He wrote a book called The Fat of the Land, wrote many books, such as Is Cancer a Disease of Civilization? Because these native peoples weren't getting cancer. And now we have cancer rates just through the roof. And that's because we're eating crap. And so, they didn't get these problems. In fact, the ones that we're bringing in, they're sailors' biscuits and their hard rations, things like that, the carbs, they were the ones getting sick. They were the ones getting nutritional deficiencies. And then they found that it was like, okay, these guys smuggled in, this crap Western food, and they're getting sick. They take that away and just start feeding them fish fat and meat, and return to health very quickly. So, and then all of our ancestors throughout the ice ages, there are no plants available during the ice ages, not for us. You're not going to cultivate any plants. You're not going to eat tubers out of the frozen ground. And so, people will argue, well, people moved down towards the equator, when the ice ages happened. No, they didn't. Starting with Homo habilis 2.5 million years ago, when these ice shelves started coming down, the fossil record is very clear that Homo habilis went up into the ice. It didn't run away from the ice. It went into the ice, because Homo habilis, unlike the now extinct other early humans, they went head on into becoming apex predators and just hunting. They were the ones that were able to survive as apex predators. The other ones that were surviving on a mix of plants and meats, or more going towards eating mainly plants, they all died out There's only Homo habilis that really leaned into the apex predator side of things. They were the ones that survived, and those were our ancestors. That's who they preceded us, and so they went into the ice. That's what the evidence shows, and there is no opportunity to largely eat plants or any plants during an ice age. What were the
Yeah.
people eating that crossed the land bridge during the last ice age from Asia to North America and populated all of North and South America? They crossed the land bridge in the Arctic Circle during an ice age. How many plants do you think they were eating? I
No
can
one.
tell you exactly zero, and I don't
Zero.
need a study to
Yeah.
tell me that because I'm not stupid. I can use my brain and
Yeah.
just look at the world around me. And so that's the thing. So if there's anything missing in meat, exclusively meat, that we had to have, we would not have made it past one generation. Maybe a couple of generations, but that's it. And we have studies in animals where you feed them a slightly deficient diet. They get very sick. They don't do well. Their kids are much worse off. They don't develop properly. Their brains don't develop properly. Next generation is even worse. And then they can't breed after that. There's a study with Pottinger's cats where they just fed them cooked meat instead of raw meat. And the cooked meat cats were much less healthy, and they were worse generation after generation. And after 3 generations, they couldn't even breed. They couldn't even reproduce. And it wasn't until they started feeding them raw meat again to have all the nutrients that they needed, because you lose some nutrients when you cook things, and cats need those. We don't necessarily, but things like taurine, which is not essential for us, but you do better with more of it. Cats have to have it. And so they're not going to be as healthy as they can be. And so after 3 generations, they couldn't even breed. They were much smaller brains, and very sick and poor little things. It was actually quite sad. And then they started feeding them raw meat. They got much healthier, and then they were able to breed. But the next generation didn't just go back to raw meat. It took 4 generations to breed back to what they were like before they started being fed cooked meat. So there's a multi-generational knock-on effect of these epigenetic sort of effects. So it is a massive difference. So we would not have survived an ice age. We would not have been able to cross that land bridge without plants unless plants are not necessary. You don't eke out survival during an ice age. You either thrive or you die. That's it. Those are the two options. It's too harsh to do anything else. If you're not thriving, you're dead. And we not only thrived, we became the most dominant species that has ever walked the earth during the ice ages because of the ice ages, because it forced us to manifest our destiny as apex predators. And when we did that, we became the absolute most dominant species on this earth. And it was because our ancestors turned to meat. And now we are destroying our health. We are destroying our civilization. We are destroying our children. And that is because we're going back to eating plants, and that's toxic to us. Or just going back to eating things that we're not designed to eat, and avoiding meat. In the 1970s, there was 1 in 10,000, and we already had processed foods and sugar and all this sort of crap back then, right? But only 1 in 10,000 kids were autistic. Now it's 1 in 34 in America, and 1 in 22 male children. 1 in 22.
22. No.
So, 1 out of 20, 5% of men going forward, of this next generation going forward, has autism. What the hell is that going to do to our civilization? And where do people get off thinking that that's okay? You're changing the natural course of that person's life. Autism is not just genetic. You have a genetic predisposition and environmental trigger, but it's something that doesn't need to exist. It's a misdevelopment of the brain that can be prevented and can even be reversed with high-fat, meat-based ketogenic diets. The ketogenic diet is the most robustly studied diet on earth.
Yeah.
It's the only one that has the high-level studies. The plant-based diets is just epidemiology. Yeah. Ketogenic diets have interventional trials, randomized controlled trials involved in it, but it's not a ketogenic diet, because you can do a ketogenic diet plant-based. You just stop eating carbs. That's what that means. But none of them do, because it's almost impossible to do that. It's almost impossible to get the requisite energy. It's almost impossible to get all the nutrients without, you have to heavily supplement on any vegetarian vegan diet, but on a ketogenic one, it's even more so. So they don't. None of these trials look at vegetarian ketogenic diets. They only look at whole food, animal-based diets where they're eating a lot of fatty meat. That's where they get the majority of their calories and nutrition is from meat, and then a bit of salad. So it's a carnivore diet with a salad. That's the most the most robustly studied diet on earth, and the one that has been shown to be the most beneficial head to head, beat the DASH diet, and showed that on multiple medical outcomes that this improves autoimmunity, improves diabetes, can reverse diabetes, can reverse all these other sorts of medical issues by going to a whole food animal-based diet with a lot of animal fat and a side salad, right? So a carnivore diet with a salad has been shown to be the healthiest diet on earth. Of course it has, because meat is what we're designed to eat, and we're not designed to eat plants. You're eating less plants and you're eating more meat. Of course it's going to be healthier. And
Perfect.
a ketogenic diet, a high-fat, meat-based ketogenic diet, has been shown to be a very effective treatment for autism. And you can actually reverse a lot of the misdevelopment if you get this in kids early, but even in adults, it's radically improving their condition. And so that they are much more healthy, they are much more cognitively intact, and they don't have all the problems that they had before. A lot of people, they can't speak, they're nonverbal. And I talked to so many parents, they said, hey, when I started doing these dietary changes, just feeding them meat, all of a sudden, my daughter who's in her 30s called me mom for the first time in her life. That's amazing.
Amazing. Yeah.
And so, I did a video on autism. I talked about a lot of this stuff, and I asked people, hey, comment below, if you've had experience with this, if you've had a family member that has had experience with this, let us know, what we see. And this is in the published literature, by the way. This is not anecdotal. This is already in the published literature. People saying, hey, ketogenic diets, a high-fat, meat-based ketogenic diet is a very good treatment for autism. And people are using this in treatment programs for kids with autism and adults right now. This is in the literature. This is not anecdotal. And so, people's experiences are very powerful, and it's very important. So, in those comments, you see all these people having these major improvements with themselves or with their kids. Some can actually be quite sad. We don't think about this in a way. We just think, oh, it's getting your brain to work better. That's great. But sometimes it's a bit scary. There was one gentleman who actually wrote, it was quite sad actually, but also, encouraging in many other ways, because he said, imagine your whole life living in a world of your own mind's creation, and then one day deciding to only eat meat, and then realizing that the world that you've lived in is not the real world, and that you've been living in a fantasy the whole time. And now you're in this real world that you don't have the social skills, the job skills, and the life skills to survive adequately. I don't have to imagine that. That's the world I live in now. It was extremely powerful and extremely heart-wrenching and sad, but the really uplifting things, now their brain is working well enough that they can see that, and they can take steps to improve their life and actually have a more fulfilling life, and be more independent and be more happy. And the really uplifting thing was how many comments below that of people saying, hey, I was where you are 1 year ago. It gets better. You can learn to do these things. It's okay. Like, you'll get through it. So many people said that and gave them encouragement. It was actually wonderful to see. So I don't know. I went on a bit of a tangent, but it's just
It was great. It was great. Just great.
Obviously, I feel very passionate about this because this affects everybody, and we have billions of people whose lives have been cut short, and not only cut short, but had to face decades of disease and illness as a result of these fraudulent nutritional guidelines and suggestions and recommendations. This is killing people in extremely large numbers, and it's cutting people's lives short and forcing people to live in pain and misery, and making our children not develop properly, not have their brains develop, and their brains and bodies not develop properly, and be sickly and ill for their whole life until they die young and dependent. And they never have independence. They never have their own life. They have to be taken care of, and that's horrible. You
Yeah.
know, taking somebody who would normally be independent and be able to live a full and rich life, you're taking that away from them. You're taking away their ability and their potential, and that's just such a horrible thing, and it's entirely preventable.
Yeah.
And so that sort of become my mission in life, to sort
And
of
that's a
undo this and
and,
get
and
this
that's
out
a
there so
that's
people
a
don't do it.
great mission. That's a great mission. I follow you on Instagram. I follow you on your podcast, the Plant Free MD.
Mhm.
And I think your work is great, and I was very honored to have you on my Instagram and to talk to you. Thank you very much for your time, and I wish you a great day, a great year. We're just beginning. Yeah.
Yeah,
Who knows what surprise we might have in this year.
absolutely. Well, thank you very much for having me. It was a pleasure.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Thanks.